Ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Key Time Sports. It's Key Time coming back with another one to talk about my reactions from week one of the NFL season. There was a lot of things that happened during week one. We also saw our very first touchdown first kickoff touchdown of the NFL season with the new kickoff dynamic rules. So a lot of people they are half okay with the new kickoff rules. Other ones they still need to see how good it is. But if you get a kickoff touchdown return from that dynamic kickoff, I believe it's okay. So now, where I want to start off at is the Baltimore Ravens and Kansas City Chiefs. Now, both of these teams, we already know that when it comes to the end of the season, both of these teams are going to the playoffs no matter what. And also, everybody was saying that this was going to be a measuring stick game, a revenge game. But I had said, I'm like, put all that hoopla and slander to bed because both of these teams are on the same level. It's just one team got Patrick Mahomes and the other one got Lamar Jackson. So both of these players, you look at their stats. Patrick Mahomes was 20 of 28, 291 yards, one touchdown, and one interception. And Lamar Jackson was 26 of 41, 273 yards, one touchdown, and zero interceptions. One thing, the most glaring problem that I saw was they went away from Derrick Henry after the first drive. The first drive, it was a steady dose of Derrick Henry. And after that, they went away from him. He finished the game with 121 yards. Now, when you look at Lamar Jackson, he acquires 75% of the Ravens offense. Because when you look at the other players that ran the ball, that was Lamar Jackson who had 122 rushing yards. Derrick Henry had 46 rushing yards. So when you look at the rushing attack for the Baltimore Ravens, outside of Lamar Jackson, it was non-existent because you look at Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers ran the ball twice, had 14 yards. Justice Hill had ran the ball once for 3 yards, and also the wide receivers outside of Isaiah Likely, nobody else cracked even 60 yards. So even though it's week one, I know it's week one. Like I said, I don't take too much away from week one. I don't. And if you are a legitimate, and excuse me, I'm not going to say that, but when you see week one is very different from later on in the season to week 11, week 12, when you know what type of team you have. I always say that after the first 4 or 5 games, you know what type of team you have. So the Baltimore Ravens are still working out the kinks. I expect them to put Derrick Henry in the offense more. You are not going to see another game where he just has 46 rushing yards. You're not going to see that. So that's all I got to say about the Ravens as far as the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, we know the Kansas City Chiefs, we know that they have a target on their back, trying to become the first team ever in NFL history to win 3 straight Super Bowls. What I seen from them on Thursday, they didn't play their best game. They really didn't. But they found a way to win. And what I can say is, you have this on a silver platter. You didn't play your best game, but first week of the season, you're not going to play your best game. No team in the NFL played their best game in week one. That is almost crazy to say. Why would a team have their best plays ready for week one. You're going to need those plays later on in the season. But on to the contrary, when you see Isaiah Pacheco, he had 15 carries, 45 yards. Xavier Worthy had 1 carry for 21 yards, fastest man in the NFL. It's starting to remind people of Percy Harvin. But Xavier Worthy, he's just taller and more faster than Percy Harvin. So that is an advantage in and of itself. When I see the receiving core that the Kansas City Chiefs have, you have Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Noah Gray, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, Justin Watson, Samaje Perine, and Juju Smith-Schuster. Now Juju Smith-Schuster didn't have a reception. Didn't have a reception in this game, but he did have a target. He did have a pass thrown his way. Now, like I said, this is just week one. Who knows what it'll be like in week 8 or 9? But do I expect the Chiefs to drop? No, I don't. Because the Chiefs, they are the odds betting favorite to get to New Orleans and win Super Bowl 59. So that's all I got to say for the first game of the NFL season. Now on to the next game. The Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Now this game was a weird touchdown turnover game because the Eagles had 3 turnovers and the Packers had 2 turnovers. When it comes to Jordan Love, I don't know. They're saying that Jordan Love is 3 to 6 weeks. He could be out, maybe longer than that, but hopefully Jordan Love has a speedy recovery. So now what I saw from the Packers, I saw a team that was really trying to find themselves. Basically, every team in week one is trying to find themselves. But when it comes to the offensive line, it's still a little iffy. Jordan Love, he is going to be okay. He was 17 of 34, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception before he got knocked out of the game, and he has experienced a knee/leg injury. Obviously, we are so grateful that it is not the ACL or MCL. So there's a possibility that he could come back later on in the season. But as far as the Packers, who do you have hold down the fort before Jordan Love comes back? Malik Willis, really? I mean, he has been an up and down quarterback. He's been mainly his career has been down in the dumps. He played for Tennessee a couple years ago, didn't really do much, and now he has been an NFL journeyman back and forth. So as far as the Packers, they have some decisions to make, whether they need to go in free agency and get one of these quarterbacks, maybe a Ryan Tannehill, a Joe Flacco, a Carson Wentz, or somebody like that to basically hold down the fort until Jordan Love comes back. As far as the Eagles, Saquon Barkley, showcase. He's put his stuff on showcase. He had 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards rushing. So the Philadelphia Eagles made a great trade in getting him. Now, when it comes to the Eagles secondary have some glaring problems. Now, even though this is the first game, and I'm going to keep reiterating that throughout this entire show, that it is just the first week of the season. It's just the first week. So it wasn't it wasn't a pretty win for the Eagles, but a win is a win, and this is just week 1. What they need to do is they need to emphasize emphasize their struggles, emphasize the glaring problems that they have, because you don't want these problems to linger on when you face somebody like Dallas or San Francisco when you get to the playoffs, because you don't want to have ball security problems when you face the 49ers in the playoffs. That's if the Eagles get to the playoffs. But all in all, the Eagles had a good game, first game, but it was a good game. So next week they have their first home game next week, and all in all, for the Packers and the Eagles, it was a good game to watch. Now, the next game I want to talk about is the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Atlanta Falcons. I looked at this game, I looked at the entirety of this game, and Kirk Cousins, mediocre quarterback. Mediocre quarterback that is making six figures. Okay? Mediocre quarterback that is making six figures. When you look at it, he was 16 of 26, 155 yards, one touchdown, and two ill-advised interceptions, two boneheaded interceptions. I mean, there was one interception. The first interception he threw, it was no Falcon in the area. None in the area. Just nothing but Steelers. But this is what you get when you sign Kirk Cousins to a contract like that. You get the interceptions from Kirk Cousins, and you get the touchdown passes from Kirk Cousins. Now, one thing I can say is rushing game didn't crack over 100 yards. Bijan Robinson had 68 yards rushing. Tyler Aguilar, he had 21 yards rushing. And Kirk Cousins, they installed the run play for him early in the game, but he didn't get any yards on it. Now, one thing I want to say is the Atlanta Falcons wide receiving core, I don't see any problems with it, but didn't nobody crack 100 yards. And I think that if the Falcons scored two more touchdowns, they would have won this game. Now, I'm going to get to the Pittsburgh Steelers. You win a game on kicking nothing but field goals. Now, this is the Atlanta Falcons. This is week 1. But as you get later on into the season, you're not going to be able to win games by just kicking field goals. You're going to have to go for it on fourth down. Matt Canada, Mike Tomlin, and whoever you put behind center, whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields had a good game. 17 of 23, 156 yards, 0 TDs, and 0 interceptions. But they consistently, they couldn't put the ball in the end zone. And stellar Pittsburgh Steelers defense. I mean, they only allowed 10 points, and the Falcons were 2 of 12 on third down, basically, because they shut them down the entire second half. They did. And one thing about the Steelers' running game, you had Najee Harris, he had 70 yards. You had Justin Fields, he had 57 yards with his run plays. Cordero Patterson had 13 yards. Jaylen Warren had 7 yards. And George Pickens, he had a run play, and he had negative 10 yards. So as far as the wide receiver core for the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's week 1. So this is not what they want to display on tape, but a win is a win. And that's all I got for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Atlanta Falcons. The next game I want to talk about is the Cardinals versus Bills. Kyler Murray had a good game. I mean he had an average game, 21 of 31, 162 yards, one touchdown, zero interception. But what do we expect to see from the Arizona Cardinals? I mean, do we expect them to make the playoffs? I certainly don't. Carolina, excuse me, I'm talking about Carolina Panthers. Arizona Cardinals are the equivalency of the Carolina Panthers because they are at the bottom. Carolina Panthers are at the bottom of the barrel. Arizona Cardinals will be at the bottom of the barrel. Kyler Murray, is he going to rejuvenize, regalvanize, and resurrect his NFL career? He is going to have to leave Arizona in order for him to resurrect his career because he's not winning anything in Arizona. It's been 78 years since Arizona has won a championship. It has. And with the way it's looking, they had the lead in this game for most of the game, and they failed to deliver the goods in the fourth quarter and close the deal and win this game. They really did. So now, when you see Arizona, I don't expect much from Arizona. And who does expect much from Arizona? Now, as far as the Buffalo Bills, they will be in the thick of things come November and December. Now, this was a pretty much tough game for them, but they did what they needed to do to win. Now, they didn't start off great. I mean, Arizona Cardinals went down the field on their first drive of the season and put it in the end zone. Now, when you see the Buffalo Bills rushing attack, the rushing attack is pretty good. You got James Cook, he had 71 yards. Josh Allen, they had run plays for him. He had 39 yards. Ray Davis, 13 yards rushing. Ty Johnson, 7 yards rushing. So, you got a good running attack. Also, Buffalo Bills wide receiving core, Keon Coleman, 51 yards. Khalil Shakir, 42 yards. James Cook, 32 yards. Mac Hollins, 25 yards. Deshaun Knox, 23 yards. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, MVS, 19 yards. Curtis Samuel, 15 yards. Ray Davis, 14 yards. Dalton Kincaid, 14 yards. And Ty Johnson, he didn't have a target or a pass thrown his way. So, when you look at the Buffalo Bills, are the Buffalo Bills iffy? It's only week 1. Come back to me week 7, week 8, and I will tell you if the Buffalo Bills are iffy or not. The next game I want to cover is the game that most people watched was the Tennessee Titans and the Chicago Bears. Now this game right here, I was looking at this game too, and Caleb Williams, first game, what do you expect? He trying to work out the kinks. But the Bears on offense, they didn't do much. They really didn't do much. Caleb Williams was 14 of 29 for 93 yards. Will Levis, Tennessee, they had this game firmly in hand. At halftime, they were leading 17-3. They were leading by 2 scores. But I had said to myself, I'm like, this game isn't over because I expect Tennessee to give this game up, and that's exactly what they did. The Bears special teams really carried them in the second half, and the Bears defense did what they had to do, and they scored off of a turnover. Now, I got the Bears as my dark horse team to make the playoffs, but they have to do better when it comes to offensive play. Now, when it comes to the rushing game, nobody cracked 100 yards for the Chicago Bears. When you look at it, DeAndre Swift had 30 yards. Caleb Williams had 15. DJ Moore had 14. Viewers Jones Jr. had 11 yards rushing. Travis Homer had 10 yards rushing. Khalil Herbert only had 4 yards rushing. So it was basically, the offense was basically non-existent with the Chicago Bears. And do I expect the Chicago Bears to keep playing like this throughout the entirety of the regular season? No, I don't. Because when you see this is the first game, and like I keep on saying, it's week 1. You don't know what you're going to get from week to week. Week 1 is a fill-out week. You don't know what you have in your team. You just trying to put something on tape. You're just trying to put something on tape. So that's all I have for the Chicago Bears and the Tennessee Titans. The next game I want to cover is the New England Patriots versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals, they don't show up in week 1, so I'm not surprised that the Cincinnati Bengals lost this game to the not Pittsburgh Steelers, to the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots, they are a team for the first time in, I'm going to say, 23 years that are not led by Bill Belichick. They are led by Gerard Mayo. And basically this game was a typical defensive slugfest, run-of-the-muck game. When you see Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, he was 21 of 29, 164 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Jacoby Brissett for the New England Patriots was 15 of 24, 121 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But the New England Patriots rushing attack, that is what basically carried them throughout this game. That's what basically carried them. Because when you look at Ramondre Stevenson, he had 25 carries for 120 yards. Jacoby Brissett, he had run package plays for him. He had 7 carries, 32 yards rushing. Antonio Gibson had 7 carries, 18 yards rushing. And also, I'm not expecting much from the Patriots. Now, this is basically a one-off for them. They are not going to make it to the playoffs. They might have a couple of upsets this season, just like they did versus the Bengals. But do I expect them to win 8 or 9 games? No, I don't. Do I expect the Bengals to win 10 or 12 games? Yes, I do. Because this is just a minor bump in the road. Since the start of the Joe Burrow era, week 1 has not been friendly to them. They don't show up in week 1. Week 2 and throughout week 2 and the rest of the season, that's where the Bengals find their footing. And I think that's where the Bengals are going to find their foot. Now, the Bengals, they have a tough game against the Kansas City Chiefs coming up this week. Now, it is not going to be an easy game against the Kansas City Chiefs, because against the Bengals, the Chiefs, let's just put this narrative to bed that the Bengals have the Chiefs number. If you believe in such ridiculousness, I am going to educate you right now. Outside of 2 occasions, the Chiefs have won every other game that the Bengals have played when the Bengals are led by Joe Burrow. That's all. So all of this ridiculousness about the Bengals have the Chiefs number is just that, ridiculousness. So that's all I have for the Patriots-Bengals game. The next game I want to talk about is the Texans and Indianapolis Colts. Now, this was a great game for the Texans part because CJ Stroud, 24 of 32, 234 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And Anthony Richardson, first game back from injury, he got injured last season in week 4. He had a well efficient game, I might add you, in a loss. Because when you see his stats, he was 9 of 19 and he threw for over 200 yards. Now it was 2 throws that he made that were over 60 yards, and I was just like, wow. I'm like, this is what the Colts drafted for. The Colts, they have their future quarterback, Anthony Richardson. He is a budding star, and the sky, he's limitless. He's really limitless because you can put him in running package formations, and you know he's a good thrower of the football. Now, when it comes to the Texans rushing game, Joe Mixon had over 150 yards. Tank Dell had 19 yards. Damian Pierce had 16 yards. CJ Stroud had 13 yards rushing. Stephon Diggs had 1 carry for 6 yards. Now, when you look at it, these two teams are very much alike. I wouldn't be surprised if we see these two teams in the playoffs. And for sure, we are going to see them later on in the season because the Colts have to travel to Houston and play them. So this is going to be a very, very good game between both of them. Because both of these teams are the spitting images of each other. They both have young quarterbacks. Now this is going to be a rivalry for years to come. The next game I want to talk about is the Jaguars and Miami Dolphins. Now, the Jaguars, they had this game throughout the first and the second half. They had this game. But that fumble, the fumble that Travis Etienne had, was very detrimental to the Jaguars because that basically put a damper on them. And also, when it comes to the Jaguars, they really couldn't generate nothing in the second half. They really couldn't. The best drive that they had in the second half, ETN fumbled. And also, Trevor Lawrence was 12 of 21, 162 yards, 1 touchdown, and 0 interceptions. The rushing game for the Jaguars, Tank Bigsby had 73 yards. Travis Etienne had 44 yards rushing. Trevor Lawrence had 8 yards rushing. Devin Devaney had 1 carry for 3 yards rushing. And when you see this, we already know that the Jaguars are a potential playoff team. But they cannot have minor slip-ups. They cannot have minor slip-ups on the defensive side of the ball. And one thing I can say is Trevor Lawrence, I got to give him credit where credit is due. He didn't throw an interception. Now last season he threw 18 interceptions. This game, he didn't throw any interceptions. Now, like I said, it's week 1. We are going to see if Trevor Lawrence is worth it of this contract. It's only week 1. I do not need anybody overreacting because there was a lot of people that were overreacting yesterday because of what the Jaguars did. And also, and also, the Miami Dolphins, they are a team to be reckoned with because they are going to be a team that will be in the thick of things, right up there with the New York Jets and the Kansas City Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals, and Baltimore Ravens. Excuse me. Now, when you see the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, he was 23 of 37, 338 yards, one touchdown, zero interception. The Miami rushing was was basically average. I'm gonna give you the stats. Jeff Wilson Jr. had 26 yards rushing. Devon Achane had 24 yards rushing. Tua Tagovailoa, he had one running package play, had 11 yards. Raheem Mostert had 9 yards. Alec Ingold had 8 yards rushing. Jalen Waddle had 3 yards. Excuse me. Jalen Waddle had 3 yards rushing for a team total. Excuse me. 81 yards rushing. Now, when it comes to the wide receiver core for the Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill had 130 yards. Jalen Waddle had 109 yards. Devontae Achane had 76 yards. Raheem Mostert had 10 yards. And Jonnu Smith had 7 yards. Julian Hill had 6 yards. And the team was very efficient in the second half. Now, this is just week one. The Miami Dolphins have to work out the kinks. And also, the Miami Dolphins defense, they had 3 sacks. They had 3 sacks against the Jaguars, which that was great. That was really great. So, as far as that game, that was a defensive game. I might add you. Either it was good defense or bad offense. I'm going to say that it was good defense because you really didn't see any scores happening until the second half from Miami. Now, the next game I want to talk about is the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. One thing about this game, when you look at the Carolina Panthers, they are a bottom of the barrel team. I know that this is just week one, but it is not looking good down there in Carolina. It's really not, because Bryce Young, 13 of 30, 161 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And when you look at their rushing game, the rushing game was non-existent. And also third down, the defense on third down for the Carolina Panthers was downright awful, and it was atrocious. Not to and I haven't even gotten to the point where the Carolina Panthers gave up 30 points in the first half. Basically, the New Orleans Saints won this game in the first half. You look at Derek Carr. Derek Carr had a very efficient game. He was 19 of 23, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. And then for the New Orleans Saints rushing attack, Alvin Kamara, 83 yards. Jamal Williams, 38 yards. Taysom Hill, 35 yards. Derek Carr, 13 yards. Jordan Mims, 11 yards. I'm going to go to the wide receiver core for the New Orleans Saints. That was very efficient. Rashad Shaheed, 73 yards. Forrester Moreau had 43 yards. Alvin Kamara had 27 yards. Juwan had 26. Jawan Johnson, had 26 yards. Jamal Williams had 13 yards receiving. Chris Olave had 11 yards receiving. Marcus Tipton had 6 yards receiving on one target, and that is it. Basically, they had 200 yards of from the wide receivers, 200 yards, and also they had one fumble recovery for the Saints. And as far as the Panthers, they have a lot of things to control and a lot of things to get better on. But do I see the Carolina Panthers winning more? I'd say winning more than 6 games. No, I don't. I actually had I actually had in my teams of with a lot to prove coming into this season, the Carolina Panthers was one of the teams I had on the list of teams that had plenty to prove this season. They really did. Now, is Bryce Young a bust? I believe it's too early to tell. It's only week 1. But as far as the New Orleans Saints, this is, on top of this, the NFC South is going to be the worst division in the NFL. Every team has a chance in the NFC South at winning the NFC South. The Panthers, Saints, Falcons, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have a chance. So all in all, bad game by the Carolina Panthers, a fantastic game by the New Orleans Saints. And the next game I want to cover is the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants. Minnesota Vikings is another team that will be at the bottom of the totem pole and the bottom of the barrel at season's end. New York Giants, I was expecting more from the New York Giants. And I'm not even going to touch on Daniel Jones right now. But when it comes to the New York Giants defense, I'm not going to bash them, because when it comes to the New York Giants offense, now I am going to get on to Daniel Jones. The New York Giants had a fumble on the Minnesota Vikings 20. It's a golden opportunity to basically come out, you done set the tone on defense, you done got your fumble, put the ball in the end zone. What I would have did, get to the 5-yard line, I would have went for it on 4th down. Let your fans know that we're not going to settle for a field goal. If we get the touchdown, fantastic. If we don't, hey, the Vikings have to drive 95 yards. But to settle for a field goal right there, that does not look great. And also, when it comes to Daniel Jones, 22 of 42, 186 yards, 2 interceptions, and it was one interception where he basically just gave the ball away. I don't know what the New York Giants have to do, but they might have to get rid of Daniel Jones at the end of this season, or possibly going in the next season. So when it comes to the New York Giants and Daniel Jones, the only reason why they gave him that big time contract is because they didn't have anybody else to back him up. But now you got 2 legitimate quarterbacks that can back him up. Drew Lock. See what you have in Drew Lock. And also the quarterback from last year, Tommy DeVito. Give him a chance, because obviously Daniel Jones is not it. He's not it. He really isn't. I could have did a better. I could have had a better day for the Giants than Daniel Jones. I really could have. As far as for the Minnesota Vikings, Sam Darnold had a very efficient game. Early in the game, he was 16 of 16. His first 16 passes he couldn't miss. And I mean, the Giants could not generate pressure at all. They really couldn't. It's going to be a long season for Giants fans. It really is. It's going to be a long season. Now, for the Minnesota Vikings, I believe that they are going to be another bottom of the barrel team. They are going to be another bottom of the barrel team for one, because you have Chicago to face in your division. You have Green Bay to face in your division. Well, Green Bay looking a little bit iffy now when it comes to the Jordan Love injury. And you also have the almighty Detroit Lions, who will not miss a beat this season. Did anybody see them play the Rams on Sunday Night Football? That was a very intriguing and also an intense game. That really was. So, New York Giants, they have to do a complete overhaul. I don't know what Brian Daboll's going to do. I don't know what owner Jim Mara is going to do. But the New York Giants, they really have to put a better product on the field. I mean, over the last 3 years, you've always started out losing the opening game. You really have started out losing the opening game. And another thing, it was the centennial season for the New York Giants, and you come out and play like that. It was basically disgraceful. Disgraceful. So New York Giants, they have a lot of things to get together. So that's all I have for the Minnesota Vikings and New York Giants. The next game I want to talk about is the Las Vegas Raiders and the LA Chargers. Mr. Khaki Pants himself, Jim Harbaugh, is back in the NFL. He really is. Now, Justin Herbert, he didn't have a good game, but when it comes to Jim Harbaugh's blueprint, he doesn't want his quarterback throwing 400 yards a game. He really doesn't. Now you see, Justin Herbert, he had a very efficient game, 17 of 26, 144 yards, 1 touchdown, and 0 interceptions. And you saw the Chargers running game. J.K. Dobbins, 135 yards. Gus Edwards, 26 yards rushing. Darius Davis, 9 yards rushing. Justin Herbert, 6 yards rushing. So he had a couple of package plays for Justin Herbert. As far as the Raiders, Gardner Minshew, who has been a career backup, he had a good game. 25 of 33, 257 yards, and also 1 touchdown and 1 INT. When it comes to the Las Vegas rushing attack, Zamir White had 44 yards. Alexander Madison had 19 yards. Gardner Minshew, he had 3 package run plays himself. He had 5 yards. Jacoby Myers had 1 carry for 3 yards. So as far as the Las Vegas Raiders, what do I see from them? I see a team that suffered a minor bump in the road. Do I expect them to be a wild card team? Maybe, maybe not. They are one of the iffy factors. They are one of the iffy factors when it comes to this season. As far as the Chargers, we already know what type of blueprint they have. They have the Jim Harbaugh blueprint. He has those guys confident, something that Brandon Staley did not do. He has the defense confident. He has the offense confident. He has the wide receivers confident. Do I think that the Chargers can make it to the playoffs? Yes, I do. Will they? It remains to be seen. So that's all I have for the Las Vegas Raiders and LA Chargers game. The next game I want to talk about is the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. Now, when it comes to this game, Bo Nix, this was his first NFL game. He was 26 of 42, 138 yards, 2 INTs. Denver Broncos rushing game was non-existent at best. Bo Nix, 35 yards rushing. Jaleel McLaughlin, 27 yards rushing. Javonte Williams, 23 yards rushing. Eric Esteem, 14 yards rushing. And also, when it comes to the Denver Broncos receiving game, I am going to give you the stats when it comes to the Denver Broncos receiving game. Josh Reynolds, 45 yards. Devon Vale, 39 yards. Cortland Sutton, 39 yards receiving. Greg DeLuche, 12 yards receiving. Michael Burton, 3 yards receiving on 1 catch. Jaleel McLaughlin, 5 catches for 1 yard, which is basically terrible. And that's all. Now, as far as the Seattle Seahawks running game concerned, you got Kenneth Walker III. He had over 100 yards. Geno Smith had 4 package run plays. He had 30 yards. Zach Charbonnet had 12 yards rushing. And Laviska Shenault Jr. had 1 yard rushing. And then you have the Seattle Seahawks running game. Not running game, receiving game. Tyler Lockett had 77 yards receiving. Zach Charbonnet had 29 yards receiving. DK Metcalf had 29 yards receiving. Jackson Smith Njigba had 19 yards receiving. Also, Noah Fant had 11 yards receiving. Kenneth Walker III had 6 yards receiving. So, the Seattle Seahawks, are they a wild card team? Yes, they are a wild card team at best. Do I expect them to be in the playoffs? Yes. Will they be in the playoffs? It remains to be seen because this is only week 1 of the 2024 NFL season. Now, the Seattle Seahawks, they have a tough mountain to climb because you have the 49ers in your division. And the 49ers are the betting favorite to get back to the NFC Championship game, if not get to the Super Bowl in New Orleans and win it. So that's all I have for the Broncos and the Broncos and Seattle Seahawks game. Now, the game that everybody was waiting on was the Dallas Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns. My man Dak Prescott, who is now a $60 million man, he had a good showing against the Cleveland Browns. The defense also had a good showing against the Cleveland Browns too. My Dallas Cowboys. Oh my goodness. How about them Cowboys? How about them? Dak Prescott, he was 19 of 32, 179 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. The running game was very efficient. Ezekiel Elliott, we got Zeke back. Now, even though Zeke is not the same player that he was 6 or 7 years ago, but it's good to see Zeke back in a Cowboys uniform because he did not look great in a Patriots uniform and playing for the New England Patriots last year. But back to the rushing attack for the Dallas Cowboys. Rico Dowdle, he had 26 yards rushing. CeeDee Lamb had 25 yards rushing. Brandon Cooks had 5 yards rushing. Deuce Vaughn, we need to get him more into the game. I know he is not a every down back. He is not a third down back. But have some package plays for Deuce Vaughn coming up later on in the season because he didn't play any last season. The Cowboys drafted him last season and he didn't play any. And Dak Prescott, he had one rush of 3 yards, and also Cooper Rush had one rush of -1 yards. So when you look at the Dallas Cowboys defense basically shut down the Browns offense. When you look at Deshaun Watson's stats, he was 24 of 45, 169 yards, one touchdown and 2 interceptions. Now, are the Cleveland Browns at a crossroads? Because Deshaun Watson has the second richest contract in NFL history besides Dak Prescott, who got the richest contract in NFL history just hours before the game. Now, I've heard a lot of people over the last 36 to 48 hours saying, what do the Browns have in Jameis Winston? Should we put Jameis Winston in the fold? I'm saying it's a little bit too early in the season to just throw in the towel on Deshaun Watson. Now, if the Browns get to week 7 or week 8 and Deshaun Watson still hasn't stepped up to the plate and put the money on the table, now put in Jameis Winston. But as you can see, the offense for the Browns was really non-existent. David Njoku had 44 receiving yards. Jordan Atkins, 27 receiving yards. Jerry Jeudy, 25 receiving yards. Jerome Ford, 25 receiving yards. Pierre Strong Jr., 20 receiving yards. Amari Cooper, 16 receiving yards. Elijah Moore, 9 receiving yards. Cedric Tillman, 3 receiving yards on 1 catch. So as far as the Cleveland Browns offense, maybe this is just a slight bump in the road, but Deshaun Watson did not look great. Now, as far as the Cleveland Browns, the next game, they are heading to Jacksonville to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. Will we see something different? It remains to be seen. So all in all, my Dallas Cowboys played a good game. The Browns, they have a lot to work on now. The next game I want to cover, and these are the last 3 games that I'm going to cover. I am going to cover the Commanders-Buccaneers game, Rams-Lions, and the game that we saw last night, Jets and 49ers. But I am going to get to the Commanders versus Buccaneers game. One thing I can say about the Buccaneers have their quarterback in Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield has resurrected his career from coming from Cleveland to going to Carolina to going to LA, playing for the LA Rams, and now he has found his home with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He played a perfect game, 24 of 30, 289 yards, and 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. When you look at that, that's a perfect game. Now, Jaden Daniels Jaden Daniels, he is the young gun that just came in. He was 17 of 24 for 184 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Now, one thing that I don't want to see is Jaden Daniels. I don't want to see him running for 88 to 100 yards. He just needs to run when he needs to. If the pocket is about to collapse, take that joker off, take that ball, and run to that first down. But do not run just because you can run, because you make the defense look bad. The defense is going to try and, dare I say it, knock you on your ass, because that's what they're going to do. That's what quarterbacks, if the quarterbacks run for 50 to about 80 yards or 200 yards, the defense is going to get tired of that, and they are going to knock Jaden Daniels on his behind. That's all I'm going to say. But as far as the wide receiver core for the Washington Commanders, Austin Eckler, the wide receiver core, 52 yards. Brian Robinson Jr., 49 yards. Zach Ertz, 28 yards. Luke McCaffrey, 18 yards. Terry McLaurin, 17 yards. I am going to pronounce this name. I don't want to butcher his name. Almighty Zacchaeus, 1 catch for 15 yards. Jamison Crowder, 1 catch for 5 yards. And as far as the Commanders defense, now the Commanders defense is led by the old Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. Now, Dan Quinn, I believe he was given this job just because Josh Harris, one of the Commanders owners, wanted something new. They didn't want Ron Rivera. Now, Ron Rivera, he's a free agent right now, and he is out there looking for a job. He really is. Now, as far as Tampa Bay concerned, rushing attack, Bucky Irvin, 62 yards. Rachaad White, 31 yards. Baker Mayfield, he had 3 package plays, 21 yards. 21 yards. Cameron Johnson had 1 carry, 0 yards. Kyle Trask had 2 carries and -2 yards. Wide receiver core for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers: Chris Godwin, had 83 yards, a touchdown. Rachaad White, 75 yards receiving. Mike Evans, 61 yards receiving. Jalen McMillan, 32 yards receiving. Trey Palmer, 19 yards receiving. Bucky Irvin, 14 yards receiving. Kay Octon, 5 yards receiving. So, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they were in the playoffs last year. Are they going to make it to the playoffs this year? It remains to be seen, but they had a great showing. They really did. They had a great showing. The Commanders, also, this is a great showing for them, but they also have a lot of things to work on. Now, Sunday night, Rams versus Lions. There was a lot of anticipation and hype around this game. The Lions came out and just gave the Rams the business. I am going to give you the rushing attack from the Detroit Lions and the Los Angeles Rams. I'm going to start off with the Los Angeles Rams. Karen Williams, 50 yards rushing. Ronnie Rivers, 16 yards rushing. Cooper Kupp, 10 yards rushing. Puka Nacua, 7 yards rushing. And we look over to the Detroit Lions. David Montgomery, or Demo as everybody call him. He 91 yards rushing. Jahmyr Gibbs, 40 yards rushing. Jameson Williams, 13 yards rushing. Khalif Raymond, 12 yards rushing. Jared Goff, 7 yards rushing. The receiving core for the receiving core for the Detroit Lions, Jameson Williams, 121 yards, Sam Laporta, 45 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs, 34 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 13 yards. David Montgomery, a.k.a. Demo, 2 yards receiving. Brock Wright, 2 yards receiving. For the Rams, Cooper Kupp, 110 yards receiving. Tyler Johnson, 79 yards receiving. Kobe Parkinson, 47 yards receiving. Demarcus Robinson, 42 yards receiving. Puka Nacua, 35 yards receiving. Karen Williams, 4 yards receiving. And that is it for the Rams and Detroit Lions wide receiver cores. Detroit Lions, odds-on favorite to make it back to the NFC Championship game along with the 49ers. Now the Rams, will they be able to make it to the playoffs like they did, make it back to the playoffs? Who knows? It remains to be seen, but this is week 1. But I like what I'm seeing from the Detroit Lions. Motor City Dan Campbell has got these guys prepared and confident, and they can beat any team in football. You saw what they did last year, the first game of the season, beating the Kansas City Chiefs. You saw that. So all in all, that was a good game. Now, the very last game that I'm going to talk about before I get out of here and get on with my Tuesday and everything else is the New York Jets and the San Francisco 49ers. Now, this game, it was all hyped up to where it was going to be. Congratulations to Aaron Rodgers for staying in the game longer than 4 plays. I got to give him a hand clap for that. So to finish the game, he was 13 of 21, 167 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Now I saw where the running game for the New York Jets was non-existent, and I'm gonna tell you how non-existent. I'm going to tell you how non-existent the New York Jets rushing game was. Bryce Hall, 54 yards rushing. Brayson Allen, 8 yards rushing. Tyrod Taylor, 7 yards rushing. Aaron Rodgers, this was a broken play. This was not a package play, but he had 1 negative yard rushing. Also, the New York Jets receiving core, Allen Lazard, 89 yards receiving. Garrett Wilson, 60 yards receiving. Bryce Hall, 39 yards rushing. Brayson Allen, 9 yards receiving, Bryce Hall, 39 yards receiving. And Tyler Conklin, 6 yards receiving. And as far as the defense for the New York Jets, they miss Hassan Reddick. I can say that. They miss Hassan Reddick because they couldn't get pressure on Brock Purdy last night. They really couldn't. Now, as far as the 49ers, we already know what the 49ers were going to do. Brock Purdy, 19 of 29, 231 yards rushing, 0 touchdowns, 0 INTs. When it comes to the 49ers rushing game, the man of the hour last night was Jordan Mason. He had 28 carries, 147 yards. Deebo Samuel had 23 yards rushing. Brock Purdy had 11 yards rushing. Brandon Allen had 1 -1 yard rushing. Now, as far as the San Francisco wide receiver core, Jawan Jennings had 64 yards receiving. Deebo Samuel had 54 yards receiving. Kyle Juszczyk had 40 yards receiving. George Kittle had 40 yards receiving. Brandon Ayuk had 28 yards receiving. Jordan Mason had 5 yards receiving. And that is it for the 49ers in this game. Now, the 49er defense was completely stellar. They got a turnover and also they got 4 sacks. Excuse me, they got 3 sacks. The 49ers, we all know what they are going to do. We expect this team to be in the thick of it. Now, can they win the Super Bowl? Can they get to the playoffs? Yes and yes. Will they get to the Super Bowl? It remains to be seen. But worst case scenario for the 49ers this season, Super Bowl championship, and the best case scenario, is the 49ers Super Bowl championship. The worst case scenario for the 49ers is lose in the NFC championship game. That is all. So now those are my reactions to week 1 of the 2024 NFL season. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Click the notification bell to get notified of all of my shows and content and reaction videos. And also follow Key City Sports on TikTok. And remember, one last thing, the key is always on time.